Seekers. That was a little bit of a song called You Tore Me Down, originally by the Flaming Groovies, and I recorded it yesterday and did the video last night. Maybe you'd enjoy it. So, I'm going to be squinting a lot today because the sunlight is bright out here, but I thought I wanted to show off a little bit of our backyard. This is mainly the work of Mother Nature and my wife, Adriana. All these flowers, well, most of these flowers, just popped up naturally. I guess they call those volunteers in the biz. Some of these were planted by my wife, but most of the ones you're seeing back here just kind of popped up. We just moved in here about a year ago, and we had no idea that we had a garden full of flowers, so there you go. Those of you who listen to my podcast, I have a podcast which is hosted by Podbean, and it is available wherever podcasts are. I find it on Spotify, but I hear you can find it on Apple Podcasts and maybe Amazon Podcasts. I don't know. It's supposedly distributed wherever podcasts are distributed. And if you listened to the most recent one, which I think it's been a couple of weeks since I put one up, I did a podcast with my nephew, Ben. And Ben wants to do another podcast, and this time he wants to do a podcast on the subject of ghosts. So this is kind of interesting because a couple of things happened recently, and maybe that has something to do with ghosts. My Aunt Sue died on April 2nd. I believe she passed on April 2nd. At least that's the day I heard about it. I'm not sure if she passed on April 1st or April 2nd. Anyway, she was my dad's sister, and those of you who've been watching this video channel know that my dad passed away in November. His sister passed away just a few days ago. I think she was 77 when she died. She was the person who gave me her Monkees record collection, which was a really great thing. That's one thing I will always remember her for. I was already starting to get into the Monkees at the time. I was a teenager and was starting to get interested in them, and I must have mentioned it to her, and she's like, "Oh, I have a whole bunch of Monkees records," and she gave me like this stack of Monkees records, which she had bought when she was a teenager, and she just didn't feel like she needed them anymore, and she gave me a stack of all of the Monkees albums through Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones. If you're a follower of the Monkees, you'll know. I think that's their first 4 or 5 albums, usually considered to be like the best Monkees albums. She apparently didn't follow them past then, which is anyway, Monkey. I'm not going to get into Monkey. I could do Monkees trivia all day long if you wanted, but I'll avoid that. Another passing happened recently, which was a kind of important thing in my life, which was John Teagle. And John Teagle was the leader of a band which I originally knew as Johnny Clampett and the Walkers, and then they later changed their name to the Walking Clampetts. And the Walking Clampetts was an institution around Northeast Ohio for decades. They started in the early 80s, and they were still performing into the 2000s. And John passed away on, I believe it was March 26th, but they were scheduled to play some shows in April, apparently. So they were still an ongoing band, but apparently John got very sick and died quite suddenly. John was 66. I don't know if I said that already. So not an old man, but not a young whippersnapper either. But he was real important to my life. He used to work in a place called Henry's Music, which was in Barberton, Ohio, and that was the place where I first took guitar lessons. I did not take guitar lessons from John himself, but John was always there in the music store, and he knew I was interested in old surf music, and that's something we kind of bonded on and talked about, and he gave me a lot of encouragement, which was very important. And then later on, John was sort of in and around. His band wasn't really a punk rock band, but all the punk rockers loved his band. They were sort of a rockabilly and surf band. And so, we sort of hung out in the same circles and knew each other. And one of my favorite memories of John was Halloween night, must have been 1983 or 84, I don't know. I was living in a place called the F Model House, which was a band house that had been the home of this band called the F Models. And I think all of the F models except for one had moved out by then, but there was all these band people, like rock and roll punk band people, living there at the time, and I had a room. And John just walked into my room on Halloween night dressed as a beatnik, and he kept going, because it was his Halloween costume, and he just kept saying, "Don't bug me, I'm nutty. Don't bug me, I'm nutty." And he wouldn't say anything else. He stayed for about 5 minutes in my room, kind of wandering around going, "Don't bug me, I'm nutty," and then walked out. That's my favorite memory of John Teagle. So, thinking about these two people who were important in my life who passed away, and then the fact that my nephew wants to do a podcast about ghosts, he said, let's talk about some Buddhist ideas about ghosts. And here's the thing. In Zen Buddhism, there isn't too much about ghosts. The only time I remember Nishijima Roshi, my ordaining Buddhist teacher, ever talking about ghosts was somebody brought up the subject of ghosts in one of his lectures, during one of his lectures. I don't remember the context of the what this was. And all Nishijima Roshi had to say was, "Yeah, I've never seen a ghost." So he wasn't interested in ghosts. He didn't have anything else to say about ghosts. Tim McCarthy, my first Zen teacher, never said anything about ghosts that I can remember. There are the one kind of ghost you do hear about in Zen circles, though, is the so-called hungry ghost, which is a preta. Now, I'll give you the definition of preta that shows up in the handy-dandy Shambhala Dictionary of Buddhism, ... and Zen. I always like to make fun of the fact that Zen is considered to be something other than Buddhism by the people who made this book. But it's a very useful book, and let's see, I marked the page. Okay, here we go. Here's their definition of preta. Literally a departed one. These so-called hungry ghosts constitute one of the three negative modes of existence. Pretas are beings whose karma is too good for rebirths in the hells. So in Buddhism, there isn't just one hell, like in Christianity. There are various hells. And also, unlike Christianity, you don't stay in hell forever. Beings who are born in hell have lifetimes just like we do here on Earth. They may be shorter or longer than earthly lifetimes, depending on which hell you get put in. And I think there are like 3 or 6 main hells. I never really studied up on this, but when you really get into the nitty-gritty of it, there are hundreds or thousands of different hells. And my favorite one, which a guy who used to come to our Zen classes found in some book, was called the Hell of Black Metal. There is really a hell in Tibetan Buddhist lore called the Hell of Black Metal. So there are various hells, and you live a life there if you have very bad karma, and you die there and get reborn somewhere else, just like you die on Earth and get reborn somewhere else. So the rebirth, reincarnation works just like it does. You don't get stuck there forever like in Christianity. So pretas are beings whose karma is too good for rebirth in hell, but too bad for rebirth as an asura. Asura is a kind of a heavenly being. Greed, envy, and jealousy can, according to the traditional view, lead to rebirth as a preta. Preta suffer the torment of hunger because their bellies are immense, but their mouths are only as big as the eye of a needle. They are also subject to various other tortures, and that's all they have to say. But I got another book called Buddhist Cosmology, which is really good reference for this kind of stuff, by Akira Sadakata, with a foreword by Hajime Nakamura. Hajime Nakamura is one of the few sort of Buddhist scholars I ever heard Nishijima Roshi say anything nice about. He wasn't very fond of Buddhist scholars, but he thought Hajime Nakamura was a guy who knew his stuff when it came to studying, when it came to like studying the facts and the history and all that stuff about Buddhism. So I thought if Hajime Nakamura wrote the foreword to this book, it was probably worth getting, so that's why I got it. And here's what this book has to say about hungry ghosts. They call them hungry spirits. Hungry spirits are the dead. The Sanskrit term preta means the departed. The idea of hunger was added later to express the miserable condition in which the dead spirits were thought to exist. The original abode of these spirits lies 500 yojanas, and I'm not sure how big a yojana is. Let's just say it's a mile or a kilometer or something, beneath Jambudvipa. And Jambudvipa is vaguely described. I kind of think maybe Jambudvipa is supposed to be like this world, but it's kind of an idea that this world exists as part of a variety of different heavens, hells, and underworlds and things like that. So it's 500 yojanas below this. That's what I think. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, and I'll talk about it later. Because whenever I've looked up Jambudvipa, I've been confused about where exactly Jambudvipa is, but I came to the conclusion that it was Earth. Among the dead spirits, some are virtuous and some are not. The former pass a pleasant life in groves and trees, or escape this netherworld to sport in heavenly palaces. The latter live in holes filled with urine and feces and suffer from continuous hunger. The typical depiction of a hungry spirit without virtue is a being with a distended stomach and a long, thin neck like a needle, who, though starving, cannot ingest anything through the throat. Some are shown managing to catch moths by attracting them to flames from their mouths, and others appear eating excrement, snivel. What is snivel? Is that snot? I guess. Pus and scum. In Japan, a colloquial term for children is gaki. Yeah, I heard that a lot. People always call it gaki, hungry spirit, because of the large amount of food they eat. Yama is the king of the realm of hungry spirits. More will be said of him later. And so on and so forth. Then it goes on to asuras, who are more like heavenly spirits, more like kind of angels. But we're talking about ghosts here. Let's just stick with ghosts, and we'll talk about asuras maybe in another video. So that's about all you get. There's all kinds of ghosts in Japanese lore which are really more like Shinto things that are not really associated with Buddhism. There's also the festival of Obon, which usually takes place in August, in the middle of August, in which it's kind of like what's that Mexican festival, like Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos? It's really similar to that, in that there's this idea that the dead return in the summertime, which is, where's Dia de los Muertos? Actually, my wife's birthday is Dia de los Muertos, so it's November 2nd. That's when the spirits of the dead come back to visit. It's almost the same idea. The spirits of the dead come back to visit for a night and then go away. It's celebrated in the middle of August, and I just looked it up to make this video, and I found out there's almost as much on the internet as what I know in my head, which is not much. I spent 11 years in Japan, which meant I lived through 11 Obons in Japan, because I don't think I ever went home in August. And I would see the festivals all the time, and it just seemed like a summer festival. People just dress up and hang out and party and drink and do stuff. And there's a little bit of stuff, around the dead coming back, but it's more like a party scene, really. I was at Tassajara, the Zen monastery, or I should say former Zen monastery, up in Northern California one year in August, and they did an Obon thing, and they made some kind of connection to Buddhism, but I kind of thought it was hokey because, having lived in Japan and been through Obon a few times, I kind of thought that the connection with Buddhism and Obon is very tenuous. Very tenuous. I mean, it's kind of one of those things. You know how the Catholic Church kind of co-opted existing folk festivals and turned them into Christmas and Easter being, coming up in a couple weeks. and turn them into sort of Catholic things. It's the same thing with Obon. Obon was an existing thing that was a Japanese cultural thing that the Buddhists kind of went, hey, this is ours, and then tried to make a thing out of. But it's very tenuous, and it doesn't really have anything to do with Buddhism, especially Zen Buddhism, especially Dogen's Zen Buddhism. So I thought it was really weird that Tassajara was doing an Obon thing, because I don't think Dogen would have approved at all of an Obon festival being held at a temple dedicated to his style of Buddhism. So anyway, I think that whenever I get it together to do that podcast with Ben, we'll talk about that, but then he and I will go off on whatever tangents. I'll probably talk to him about a couple of my encounters with the dead. I've talked about all of them on this video channel, but never sort of specifically all in one place, so you'd have to kind of go through the videos and find them. I've encountered my dad after he died. I encountered my mom after he died. I encountered my friend David Cody after he died. And I don't really have any strong beliefs on encountering people after they died. So the fact that I have encountered people after they died has been really weird for me, because I don't have a box to fit it in my own sort of philosophical framework. I had a teacher who didn't believe in ghosts at all. I studied Dogen, who never really talked much about ghosts or meeting the dead, or there's no sort of framework in Zen Buddhism for that sort of thing. And I don't know what I'll say to Ben about it. All I know is it happened, So, and I can't deny it to myself, although I don't have a good sort of philosophical framework to put it in that kind of fits it all neatly into a nice philosophy that I can just there's a fly buzzing around me. Anyway, so maybe we'll talk about that on the podcast if we ever get it together to do it. So look forward to that. Anyway, if you want to support what I do on these videos and podcasts, because the podcast is offered for free, just like these videos are offered for free, you can go to the URL that you are seeing on your screen right now. It is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main and usually only ways of making a living, and I appreciate your support, but as always, you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Beware of ghosties. Hey Ziggy, how you doing? Have you seen any ghosties? Have you seen ghosts? Sometimes you bark at unknown things in the house, and I don't know what those are. Maybe those are ghosts. You don't like the trucks, do you? Alright, I'm gonna go edit the video. You wanna come back inside? We'll see You should be sorry too.
tore